Chapter 61-62. Blood splattered everywhere, and a familiar scream was heard. Everyone turned to look and realized that guild leader Luo had died at the hands of a skeleton. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with fear and disbelief. It seemed that he did not expect to die here today. Guild leader Luo! Feng Yuxian exclaimed. Even though she was exhausted from dealing with the situation and realized that she might end up in a miserable state, she did not believe that she would die here. Only when Luo Qinghao died in front of her did she realize that death was really close. Di Beichen's determination was really terrifying. Because of their previous attitude, Di Beichen also had the same intention of killing them. Yan Yi and the others were completely dumbfounded, and their hearts were in turmoil. Originally, Luo Qinghao had already been severely injured after his battle with Di Yuju. Coupled with the fact that they were unable to split themselves up, there was no way for them to help him. Who would have thought that the extremely weak Luo Qinghao would die at the hands of the skeleton just like that? For a moment, everyone's hearts were in chaos. When the guild's cultivators who were still alive saw that their guild leader had fallen, the last string in their hearts was completely pulled taut. I don't want to stay here. I want to leave, only death awaits me if I stay here. The cultivators fled as if they were possessed. They were all going to die, but perhaps there was a chance of survival if they fled. In an instant the group scattered like scattered sand. Everyone wanted to run for their lives, and the despair that came from the bottom of their hearts made them feel like they were about to collapse. Apart from that, some cultivators even knelt down and begged Di Beichen for mercy. Young Master Di, I beg you, if you give me a way out, I will never do such a thing again. I swear, as long as I can live, I will leave the guild and have nothing to do with it anymore. At that moment everyone was in tears. This was the worst decision they had ever made. Even if there was a risk of losing their lives during the training, the scene before them had destroyed all their hopes bit by bit, causing them to lose their confidence. Everything in front of them was dark and gloomy. Fear was magnified infinitely. The feeling of watching death getting closer and closer was the real torture. However, they did not have the courage to die. In such a dilemma, they were going crazy. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at the scene before her. In fact, these cultivators did not have any enmity with them. It was just that they had different standpoints. In the face of such begging, they didn't feel good either. At that moment, Bai Li Yanche whispered a few words to her. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes turned slightly, and she nodded slightly, understanding. No one noticed this scene, but everyone noticed that the giant beast summoned by Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly went crazy and attacked Lei Ming. Lei Ming's strength was originally on par with this giant beast, and neither could do anything to the other. However, after so many things had happened, his mind had long been in a mess. Luo Qinghao's death had given him too much of a shock. Coupled with these hysterical cultivators, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Most of them were thinking about how to get out of this predicament. Chapter 61-63. That enormous force seemed to have shifted his internal organs, and a few of his ribs were broken. His entire body felt like it was falling apart as he fell heavily to the ground. Bang! Lei Ming's figure fell into the group of skeletons. These skeletons did not show any mercy, and their attacks were ruthless. Lei Ming only felt that he had not even had the chance to catch his breath when countless fists came flying towards him. Bang, bang, bang! It was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Even the famous President Lei was somewhat exhausted at this moment. Save me! Lei Ming shouted. If he could not escape now, he was afraid that he would follow in Luo Qinghao's footsteps. The Earth Elemental President Hu Heipo was the closest to Lei Ming. After seeing that Lei Ming was seriously injured, he quickly rushed to his side. The elemental energy in his body surged out, and the tyrannical force was like a gust of wind, directly blowing away the skeletons around Lei Ming. Seeing this, the badly battered Lei Ming heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, he had a chance to catch his breath. However, at this moment, Feng Youxian's extremely sharp voice suddenly rang out, "President Lei, be careful." Lei Ming was slightly startled. Before he could understand what Feng Youxian meant, he saw a huge mountain flying towards him. His eyes widened and his body seemed to have lost control at this moment. He could only stare blankly at the scene in front of him, as if he did not dare to believe that all this was real. Hu Heipo had wanted to save Lei Ming, but after hearing Feng Youxian's reminder, he turned his eyes to the side. He saw the terrifying giant beast charging towards him like a thunderbolt. Its mountain-like body was extremely terrifying. Even though he had dodged at the first moment, he was still sent flying by the impact. At the moment of impact, he felt as if he had been crushed by a ferocious beast, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Such terrifying strength was simply shocking. They were simply no match for such a huge beast. Everyone present stared blankly at this scene. The giant beast's move was simply too shocking. President who had only been hit once, and he had already become like this. Then, what would President Lei look like after being crushed by the mountain? A question mark. Everyone's mind was filled with a question mark. They didn't even dare to think about that tragic scene. If they hadn't guessed wrongly, the chances of President Lei surviving in such an environment were too slim. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw this, she breathed a sigh of relief, and her whole body relaxed. Among the 5 presidents, Lei Ming and Luo Qinghao were the ones who objected the most. Therefore, no matter what, these 2 presidents had to be dealt with. Only with the death of these 2 guild leaders would the rest of the matter become easier. Otherwise, these 2 fellows would definitely become a threat in the future. At the same time, Di Beichen also let the cultivators who were begging for mercy go. To put it bluntly, these people were just pawns being used from the beginning to the end. Just by looking at the way they were crying, it was easy to guess that they wouldn't dare to go against them in the future. The people who begged for mercy did not expect Di Beichen to really agree. They were just really broken down and wanted to find a way to vent their emotions. In that endless fear, they felt worse than death. When Di Beichen let them go, they immediately felt grateful to Di Beichen. Chapter 61-64. Just as the crowd was wondering what President Lei would look like under the gigantic beast, the mysterious door beneath Bailey Hongzhuang's feet reappeared once again. The gigantic beast slowly walked back after seeing the mysterious door. It looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes full of admiration and respect. However, as the gigantic beast slowly left, the crowd finally saw the real situation clearly. With one look, everyone's hearts couldn't help but tremble. President Lei's figure was nowhere to be seen. All that was left was a pile of flesh and blood. Rumble. The mysterious door closed and the gigantic beast disappeared from the crowd's sight. Everyone was dazed for a moment as they stared at the mysterious door which had completely disappeared. It was as if that ferocious and terrifying gigantic beast had never appeared in the first place. The crowd was filled with fear as they stared at the enchanting and proud figure. This was the first time they had seen such a technique. This woman was simply a mysterious and terrifying existence. Even the leaders of the various organizations did not dare to underestimate Bailey Hongzhuang, because no one knew how many gigantic beasts she could summon. In addition to the Beast King and the Dragon Clan, this woman's techniques were already terrifying enough to send chills down their spines. At the same time, Di Beichen was also a man with shocking potential and extremely terrifying potential. The union between these two could be said to be a match made in heaven. However, this was a complete disaster to the rest of the crowd. Initially, it would be a good thing to have a clear understanding of the Di family's true power. Everyone would be able to make a rough estimate of their power after seeing their trump card. However, after having a true understanding of their power, everyone gave up on the thought of going against them. That would really be digging their own graves. Hongzhuang, what's that gigantic beast's name? This is the first time I've seen you summon it. Shangguan Yingying stared curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. Every time Bailey Hongzhuang summoned a gigantic beast, she could not recognize it. It was very interesting. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head in response to Shangguan Yingying's question. Actually, I don't know either. As she gradually became more proficient in her summoning technique, she realized that she could not only summon the demonic beasts that she had seen before. However, every time she tried to summon a beast, she would succeed as long as she thought about the characteristics of the beast she wanted to summon. The only thing that didn't change was that the stronger the demonic beast he summoned, the more mental energy he needed to summon it. She was now able to summon many demonic beasts with the same cultivation level as her, but today's battle clearly required more powerful demonic beasts, so she tried her best to summon such a big fellow. Reality proved that the effect was very good. You don't know either? Shangguan Yingying was slightly stunned. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded with a helpless smile. It doesn't matter what species it is, as long as it's strong enough. That makes sense. Di Beichen quietly turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. He had also noticed the private conversation between Bai Li Yanche and Bailey Hongzhuang. After this conversation, Hongzhuang had quickly taken care of President Lei. There must be some connection between them. Noticing Di Beichen's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly but did not reply. In the blink of an eye, only 3 of the 5 presidents were left. The defeat was set. Everyone knew that it was only a matter of time. As long as Di Beichen was willing, the remaining 3 presidents would all stay here. Chapter 61-65. Bang! Jun Hongcheng's figure fell heavily to the ground. Di Yujue's face was indifferent and the corners of his lips curled into a sarcastic arc. You've been focusing on scheming all these years. Your cultivation hasn't improved much. Jun Hongcheng's face was extremely ugly. In fact, he had always known in his heart that his cultivation talent was not as good as Di Yujue's. Even though Di Yujue had spent a lot of time looking for Di Beichen over the years, he still couldn't catch up with Di Yujue's cultivation. In fact, it was precisely because he knew that he had no hope in terms of strength that he began to look for other ways. As the head of the family, strength was very important, but so was strategy. Indeed, now it seemed that he had failed. Head of the family. The cultivators of the Jun family were anxious. Di Yujue, so what if you are stronger than me? If it weren't for your better luck, you would have been defeated long ago. At this moment, Jun Hongcheng didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his approach. It was just that God had been helping Di Yujue. If Di Beichen hadn't come back, the Di family would have been defeated long ago. At this moment, a series of footsteps suddenly came from behind. Look, isn't that President Liu and President Song? There are also cultivators from the Di family and the Ouyang family around them. It seems that they were the ones who found President Liu and Song Qinghao. Everyone knew very well that the 2 presidents didn't come before, not because they were uncomfortable as President Lei and Song Qinghao had said, but because they had used some means to prevent them from coming. This was probably the result of trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. If President Liu and Song Qinghao had come earlier, Lei Ming and Luo Qinghao wouldn't have died. Feng Yuxian and the other 2, who had fallen into despair, suddenly let out a sigh of relief after seeing President Liu's figure. They only felt their whole body relax. For the first time, they felt that President Liu was their savior. Lu Hongwei and Song Langtian were very anxious all the way, for fear that something would happen to Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang if they were late. They were also very angry about what happened yesterday. They never thought that Lei Ming and the others would go so far and do such a hateful thing. Last night, when they told Lei Ming and the others about their idea, the 5 of them didn't object too much. Although they were a little unwilling, they still agreed in the end. Originally, they felt that it was a little strange and thought that it would take some time to convince them, but they didn't expect that everything would go much smoother than they thought. However, they did not expect that they would be drugged unconscious that very night, so that they would not be able to attend today. If someone hadn't found them, they probably wouldn't have woken up today. Along the way, A complicated feeling of regret and depression spread in their hearts. It was all their fault for being too relaxed, resulting in such negligence. However, when they arrived and saw the skeletons all over the mountains and plains, and Di Bei Chen's party completely occupying the advantage, their hearts were incomparably shocked. This situation seemed to be a little different from what they had imagined. Song Langtian and Lu Hongwei couldn't help but look at each other. So Di Beichen's group had the advantage now? President Lu, are Di Beichen's group so strong? Song Langtian swallowed a mouthful of saliva. In the face of such a large number of skeletons, he could no longer maintain his image as the president calmly. This is the first time I know about it. Chapter 61-66. Why are we only seeing the three presidents? Where are President Lei and President Luo? Song Langtian was a little puzzled. Logically speaking, it was impossible for President Lei and President Luo to be absent at this time. Lu Hongwei was also puzzled. This situation was unexpected. Looking at the sorry state of Feng Yuxian and the other two, it seemed to be very difficult. Feng Yuxian saw Lu Hongwei and Song Langtian standing there in a daze, seemingly shocked by the situation in front of them. She immediately shouted, "President Lu, save us! Save us?" Lu Hongwei was dumbfounded. Feng Yuxian was actually asking him for help? At the same time, Di Beichen turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Yanche again. He suddenly understood why Hongzhuang had made such a decision earlier. Obviously, with Yanche's mental strength, he had probably sensed that President Lu and the others were approaching. Once President Lu arrived, they would not be able to kill Lei Ming unscrupulously. Therefore, they had to take Lei Ming's life before President Lu arrived. Although Lu Hongwei still did not understand the situation in front of him, he still said, "Stop! Everyone, stop!" Seeing this, Di Beichen also stopped the skeletons. He could ignore other people, but he could not do so in front of these two presidents, because these two presidents had supported them from beginning to end. His principle of doing things had always been that if people respected him, he would respect them tenfold. If others were good to him, he would naturally be good to them. Under Di Beichen's command, the skeletons neatly opened a path for Lu Hongwei and the others to pass through like soldiers. Looking at such a shocking scene, everyone could not help but be shocked again. These skeletons did not seem to be dead at all under Di Beichen's control, and such a uniform action was even more shocking. This was the first time Lu Hongwei saw a dark attribute cultivator controlling skeletons, but he had to admit that such control was indeed very powerful. Soon, Lu Hongwei had arrived in front of them. Feng Yuxian and the other two could not help but breathe a sigh of relief when they saw the skeleton army stop. After fighting for so long, they were also very tired. Di Linxian and the others also stopped and stood beside Di Beichen. Today's matter was not their problem from beginning to end. If the five presidents had not gone too far, things would not have developed to this point. What the hell is going on? Lu Hongwei's face was livid. As soon as he opened his mouth, the deterrence of a high position for a long time directly erupted. Feng Yuxian quickly said, "President, Di Beichen and the others are too much. President Lei and President Luo have already died. You must seek justice for the two presidents." As soon as these words came out, Lu Hongwei and Song Langtian both trembled, their faces filled with disbelief. For a moment they even wondered if they had heard it. "President Feng, are you saying that President Lei and President Luo have fallen?" Song Langtian couldn't help asking. Feng Yuxian nodded. "Yes, it's all thanks to them." Lu Hongwei's expression instantly became complicated. He never thought that the two presidents would die like this. This matter was far more complicated than he had imagined. How could this be? Lu Hongwei's face was pale, and his heart was filled with regret. Chapter 61-67. President Lu, we can't just listen to one side of the story. Di Linxuan's face was slightly cold. He didn't think much of the 5 presidents before, but after seeing their faces today, he no longer had any respect for them. Today, the 5 presidents stopped the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly and even threatened to kill all the Dark Attribute cultivators. Now we can only blame ourselves for falling to this point. Di Lin Xian Yu. Yen Ye's face was livid. Although he also understood that Di Lin Xian was telling the truth, they had lost face today. Are you the only ones who can make a move and we have to passively take a beating? Di Yujue's face was arrogant and indifferent, and his dark eyes were filled with killing intent. Facing that pair of terrifying eyes, Yen Yi couldn't help but shut his mouth. Now, facing these people again, he no longer had the confidence he had before. You actually threatened to kill all the Dark Attribute cultivators? Lu Hongwei looked at Feng Yuxian and the others in disbelief. He thought that they just wanted to stop this matter, but he didn't expect them to go so far and want to kill the other party. Feng Yuxian said weakly, "This decision was made by President Lei suddenly. Don't you know how to stop it?" Lu Hongwei was also furious. He thought that it was bad enough that they couldn't come today, but he didn't expect them to do such a thing. Even if it was just a few words, he roughly understood the whole process of the matter. With Lei Ming's simple and violent character, he must have wanted to take this opportunity to kill them all, but he didn't expect the Di family's background to be so terrifying. Instead, he was controlled by the other party and even lost his life. Feng Yuxian and the others looked embarrassed. They opened their mouths and wanted to explain, but they didn't know what to say. In fact, they didn't expect Lei Ming to make such a decision because Lei Ming didn't discuss it with them beforehand. When Lei Ming said it, they were already in such a situation, and they couldn't object, so it went on inexplicably like this. Lu Hongwei took a deep breath. After understanding all the situation, his mind was in a mess. This situation was too complicated, and the most important problem was how to deal with it. Song Langtian didn't know what to say at this moment. In just half a day, the situation had fallen to such an irreversible point. Strictly speaking, this was indeed the fault of the 5 guild leaders. Even if they opposed the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly, they shouldn't have made such a crazy decision. However, killing 2 guild leaders was not an easy task. After a while, Lu Hongwei turned to Di Beichen and said, "Di Beichen, can you let these skeletons leave first?" Being surrounded by a sea of skeletons was not a pleasant feeling. Even if they had made a decision, it seemed that they had no choice but to do so under the threat of the skeleton. Di Beichen stared at Lu Hongwei. He didn't want things to escalate to this point, but there were many things that he had no choice but to do, so he didn't regret it. He respected Chairman Lu because of his tolerance and understanding of them. However, if President Lu was the same as Lei Ming and the others, he would not back down either. For the people he cared about, he had no way out. Chapter 61-68. What happened today must have crossed Di Beichen's bottom line. The look in his eyes was completely different from the one he saw yesterday. Looking at the corpses on the ground around him, he understood that this battle had been very torturous. Both sides had suffered casualties, but the 5 major guilds had suffered more. He still remembered that yesterday, he had confidently guaranteed that this matter would not be too big of a problem. However, he did not expect something like this to happen today. It was normal for Di Beichen to have such an attitude. Once bitten, twice shy. Even he could not easily let these skeletons leave under such circumstances. Otherwise, the entire Di family would not have any protection. The next moment, Lu Hongwei looked at the surrounding cultivators and suddenly said, "I hereby announce that from today onwards, the Dark Sacred Assembly is officially established. From today onwards, there are no longer only 7 major guilds in the upper realm, but 8 major guilds." Following Lu Hongwei's words, the crowd was in an uproar. Even though they had already guessed that this would be the result today, they could not help but feel touched when it really happened. This meant that from today onwards, the structure of the upper realm had begun to change. They had no reason to discriminate against dark attribute cultivators. D. Bachin was no longer just the young master of the D family, but also had another identity, the president of the Dark Sacred Assembly. At this moment, no one doubted D. Bachin's ability anymore. He had used his actions to prove that he was worthy of this title. Feng Yuxian could not help but feel anxious when she saw Lu Hongwei directly announce this result. President Lu, how could you announce this directly? After experiencing today's events, she was very depressed and had also suffered a certain blow. However, after President Lu appeared, she only hoped that he could change everything. She did not expect President Lu to directly announce this result. This also meant that the 5 presidents had completely failed in front of D. Bachin. Hearing Feng Yuxian's words, Lu Hongwei's expression was calm and unmoved. This was my decision yesterday. If you hadn't knocked me out and prevented me from coming, this wouldn't have happened today. The dignified voice was filled with unconcealable anger. Lu Hongwei was very angry. The whole thing clearly did not need to be like this, but it had become so difficult to even clean up the mess. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd went into an uproar. The smart people present had already guessed that Lu Hongwei and Song Longtian's absence must not be because they were uncomfortable, but they didn't expect the 5 presidents to be so bold as to knock them out directly. Feng Yuxian, Yen Yi, and Hu Heipo's expressions turned ugly. They all understood that this matter had truly angered President Lu. Under such circumstances, they didn't have the confidence to say anything else. If it wasn't for President Lu's appearance, they might have already lost their lives. After announcing this decision, Lu Hongwei turned his head and looked at D. Bachin. D. Bachin also understood that this matter had nothing to do with President Lu. It was just that no one had expected Lei Ming and the others to do something so outrageous. Retreat! D. Bachin's loud and clear voice resounded, and the group of skeletons respectfully saluted in his direction, as if they were subjects submitting to D. Bachin. The aura was vast and the scene was spectacular. Chapter 61-69. Thud, thud, thud. Everyone looked at the orderly skeleton army and could not calm down for a long time. This scene was too spectacular. At this moment, everyone could not help but envy D. Bachin's ability. If they could also summon such a skeleton army, how awe-inspiring would that be? The few guild leaders heaved a sigh of relief after seeing the skeleton army leave. Previously, when they were surrounded, even their breathing was suffocating. Seeing this, Lu Hongwei's eyes revealed a trace of relief. He had always known that D. Bachin was an upright and kind person. If it was not for today's events that forced him to this point, he would not have done such a thing. Guild Leader Lu, how should we account for the deaths of Guild Leader Lei and Guild Leader Luo? Yen Ye's face was ashen. The deaths of 2 guild leaders was a big matter. If it was any other day, it would be a serious crime for someone to kill a guild leader. Today's matter was a conflict between guilds. Life and death are up to fate. Since they have died, it means that they were not strong enough. We will not pursue this matter further, Lu Hongwei said. Guild Leader Lu, how can this be? Hu Heipo was stunned. How could such a big matter be resolved so casually? Then what do you want to do? Lu Hongwei raised his eyebrows. If Guild Leader Lu did not take the initiative to kill all darkness attribute cultivators, things would not have developed to this stage. Now that both sides have suffered so many casualties, are you saying that you want to exchange a life for a life? Are the casualties not enough? Lu Hongwei was already in a fit of anger. With so many things happening, he was extremely unhappy. Hearing the other 3 guild leaders' incessant questions, he felt even more irritated. With such a large number of casualties, it would definitely be a blow to the reputation of all the guild. Today's matter had reduced them to a joke. But now that things had developed to this stage, the only way was to stop the losses. Continuing to cause trouble would not benefit either side. Lu Hongwei's words blocked Hu Heipo's mouth. Puhepo could not answer a single word. The three guild leaders looked at each other helplessly. Guild leader Lu was originally biased towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Now that Lei Ming had died, they had no right to speak in such a situation. Therefore, they could only let President Lu make the decision. From now on, I hope that everyone will no longer discriminate against dark attribute cultivators. They are the same as everyone else. Lu Hongwei's loud voice rang in everyone's ears. Similarly, I hope that everyone won't hold a grudge over what happened today. Every major decision will be accompanied by blood. This is a change in the upper realm's structure. At the end of his speech, Lu Hongwei's gaze fell on Di Beichen and the three guild leaders. Although you've met on the battlefield today, as guild leaders of your respective guilds, it's inevitable that you'll cross paths on a daily basis. After today, I hope that you can turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk, and write off all these grievances. President Lu, don't worry. I will. Di Beichen's cold face finally showed a faint smile at this moment, but this smile was not for the three presidents, but for Lu Hongwei and Song Langtian. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have enough time, he wouldn't have minded killing all three of them at once. Chapter 6170. Learning from his mistakes, he believed that these three presidents were not stupid people. If they were to stir up trouble again, they might not be as lucky as they were today. Even though Feng Yuxian and the other two were furious, they understood that they had no choice but to lower their heads. Diujue and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. Fortunately, President Lu was not like Lei Ming. Otherwise, this matter would have never ended. Di Linxian heaved a sigh of relief as a gratified smile appeared on his face. This decision, which everyone had thought to be incomparably crazy, had actually succeeded. Di Beichen had relied on his own power to change the situation in the upper realm and had also won a chance for a peaceful life for the darkness-type cultivators. All the darkness-type cultivators could not help but cheer at this moment. Many of them were crying tears of joy. They had been waiting for this day for a long time. They had even prepared themselves to lose their lives today. However, their wish had come true. They no longer had to endure the gazes of others and could live openly. Master, this is great. Xiao He could not help but jump up. So many twists and turns had happened today. Only now could she truly feel at ease. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Her eyes were filled with complicated emotions. She knew that Di Beichen would definitely be able to do it. Before she had made this decision, she had already thought of many possibilities. She had even thought that if there was no way to reverse the situation in the end, she would do everything she could to invite Granny Hua and the others over. This was because she could not accept the fact that the people she cared about had left just like that. Fortunately, the situation was not that bad. After gathering the power of so many people, Di Beichen had summoned an incomparably large number of skeletons. Xiao Yanlong lowered his head dejectedly. His entire being seemed to have received a huge blow. Even his hair seemed to have turned white at this moment. They had thought of so many ways, but they never thought that they would fail at the last moment. This feeling was simply too unbearable. The rise of the Di family was unstoppable. After witnessing today's events, it was likely that no one would dare to make an enemy out of them. Diujue had made it very clear that he would destroy their family and the Jun family. Thinking of this, Xiao Yanlong felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, bringing with it extreme despair and regret. He raised his head slightly and looked at Diujue's cold and indifferent face. He understood that all of this could no longer be changed. Looks like I'm quite lucky. Jiang Wenyan chuckled. I didn't lose my life in this competition. Young master, does what you said before still count? The cultivators of the Jiang clan could not help but ask. What words? You said you're not going to be the young master anymore. Jiang Wenyan spread out his hands and raised his eyebrows slightly. With an innocent look, he said, You must have heard wrongly. At the same time, the cultivators from the Murong family also asked the same question. Murong Jing chuckled and said, "Are you kidding me? It wasn't easy for my father to hand over the position of young lord to me. How can I give it up so easily? Am I such an irresponsible person?" Everyone looked at each other and rolled their eyes. Chapter 61-71. Just like that, the Dark Sacred Assembly's founding ceremony came to an end, and the 5 guilds returned in defeat. Lu Hongwei spoke a lot about the changes after the Dark Sacred Assembly was established, the various considerations he had made, and the reasons for his final decision. It was not because he was forced by the situation, but the result of careful consideration. Not only that, but he also reprimanded Feng Yuxian and the others for their actions this time and prevented similar situations from happening in the future. Feng Yuxian and the others did not say anything before leaving. They were exhausted and only hoped to go back and rest quickly. Of course, another more important reason was that they had lost all their face today. They really did not want to face other people's gazes. Lu Hongwei also left after explaining some things. The Dark Sacred Assembly was a newly established guild, and Di Beichen and the others must have set up many rules themselves. What he explained was nothing more than some common rules between the 8 guilds, as well as some rules that needed to be followed on a daily basis. Although the 8 guilds usually operated independently and did not have much contact with each other, the safety of the entire upper realm was related to them. Therefore, under some special circumstances, they could not avoid working together. Di Beichen naturally did not have any objections to this. In this battle, whether it was the Di family, the Lin family, or the Dark Sacred Assembly, all of them had suffered significant losses. During the battle, everyone's hearts had never been calm. However, when they were cleaning up the mess, they felt even more sad. Facing the fallen cultivators, Di Beichen felt very guilty. His expression was very gloomy all day, and he exuded a faint sadness. "Beichen, none of us wanted to see this happen, but this was forced by the situation. Everyone can understand." Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen with concern. Di Beichen had not said much all day, but she could understand Di Beichen's thoughts with just one look. Normally, they would often fight, and they had seen many deaths and injuries. However, when all of this was related to the family members they cared about, they could not help but feel sad. Di Beichen nodded slightly. "I understand. Everyone understands. Otherwise, everyone would not be so determined to help me. It's just that I can't help but feel guilty when I see the sad faces of the deceased cultivators' loved ones." He was the young master of the clan, and his responsibility was to protect the cultivators of the clan. However, he was also the one who had caused so much damage to everyone. In fact, after he had decided to do this, he had hesitated, worried that his family would be affected by his actions. But at the same time, he was also very clear that his strength alone was not enough. Bailey Hongzhuang hugged Di Beichen from behind. Her lips curled into a faint smile. She could feel all of Di Beichen's guilt and sorrow. She thought that the reason why she liked Di Beichen so much was not only because of his handsome appearance and powerful strength, but also because of his sense of responsibility. Compared to the selfishness of Jun Lingxuan and the others, his sense of responsibility to carry everything on his shoulders was the biggest shining point, and also the biggest difference between them. "I understand what you're thinking. This kind of grief from the death of your loved ones is very difficult to bear, but have you noticed that everyone never looked at you with the slightest bit of blame? This was because these sacrifices were for a better future. The stronger the clan, the better the protection of the clan's descendants in the future." Chapter 61-72. For this point, Bailey Hongzhuang had only discovered it a while ago. In the past, they had always fought alone and had never implicated the entire family. Originally, she didn't know how to face those gazes. It wasn't until she noticed that there wasn't the slightest bit of resentment in everyone's eyes that she understood that this was the feeling of a family. Their small family had indeed been hurt, but they understood that the big family had a better future. Therefore, she understood at that moment. For a big family to be able to stand tall, this kind of thing had definitely happened more than once or twice. Everyone had already prepared to sacrifice themselves for the family, just as the family would always protect them. This was the cohesion of a family. Bailey Hongzhuang's gentle voice walked into Di Beichen's heart, bringing a trace of sunlight to his heart that was shrouded in darkness. That trace of sunlight gradually grew stronger, dispelling the surrounding darkness and bringing light and warmth. Di Beichen suddenly turned around. Hongzhuang, I want to go out and take a look. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Okay. Walking on the family's road, one by one, the disciples passed by them. Noticing that the crowd not only didn't have the slightest bit of criticism, but instead, their gazes were filled with admiration, Di Beichen suddenly understood what Bailey Hongzhuang meant. Young master is really too amazing. He actually established the Dark Sacred Assembly. He's really great. From now on, no one will dare to provoke our family anymore because everyone knows how powerful our young master is. You don't know how proud I was of the family when I felt their gazes on me at that time. A group of 14 to 15-year-old cultivators gathered together. They didn't participate in this battle, but they saw it. Look, everyone is proud of you. Bailey Hongzhuang's face bloomed with a spring breeze smile. Looking at these children who hadn't been cultivating for long, she couldn't help but think of herself. Di Beichen's expression gradually eased, and his heart gradually relaxed. Not far away, some of the older cultivators were also walking over slowly. Young master, it's great that you're able to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. My son is also a dark attribute cultivator. He won't have to feel inferior in the future. A man looked at Di Beichen excitedly. Because the young master was also of the dark attribute, his son was not kicked out of the family because of this. However, it was inevitable that he would feel inferior. Now everything had finally changed. This is what I should do. Di Beichen's lips curled into a smile. At this moment, his heart was completely at ease. Indeed, there were many casualties this time, but in the future, countless darkness-type cultivators would benefit. All in all, it was all worth it. Noticing the change in Di Beichen's expression, the smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's face became brighter. After the battle ended, the Di family first held a memorial ceremony for the cultivators who had fallen in this battle. Di Yujue also gave more compensation to the families of these cultivators. Every cultivator who had sacrificed themselves for the family was a hero. They were the pride that they would always remember. After everything was arranged properly, the Di family held a celebratory feast to celebrate their success. This was not only the success of the Dark Sacred Assembly, but also the success of the Di family. Chapter 61-73. Since the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly, there would be cultivators arriving here every day. Unlike before, where they couldn't see the light of day, every practitioner was pleasantly surprised to register as a member of the Dark Guild and receive the Dark Attribute training method. This was a pleasant surprise for all dark cultivators. The cultivation method of the Dark Attribute had been lost for many years. Over the years, no one had been able to cultivate it. They never thought that they would have it all now. For a time, almost all dark cultivators worshipped Di Beichen as a god. That kind of worship and reverence was not something that other guild leaders could have. Di Beichen became the guild leader of the Dark Sacred Assembly without any surprise, and under his decision, Huang Fu Ting became the vice guild leader of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Usually, he would not stay in the Dark Sacred Assembly often, and Huang Fu Ting and Qin Wan had already planned to take root in the Emperor Cloud City, so he was undoubtedly the most suitable person to be the vice guild leader to deal with many matters of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Huang Fu Ting did not expect that Di Beichen would hand over such a heavy responsibility to him, and he was a little flattered. He originally wanted to refuse, but after hearing Di Beichen's various reasons, he did not refuse and accepted it. For so many years, He had been organizing dark cultivators to gather together, but to complete this pioneering work, they alone were not enough. The most fortunate thing was that his vision was not wrong. Choosing Di Beichen as the young master was the wisest decision. Bailey Hongzhuang's current identity was also very magical. Since her dual attribute identity was exposed, she had become the Dark Sacred Lady. Lu Hongwei also clearly told everyone that he had never agreed to let Bailey Hongzhuang resign from the position of the Light Sacred Lady. No matter what she did in the future, the Light Sacred Lady would only be her. Bailey Hongzhuang knew Lu Hongwei's good intentions and did not refuse, not to mention that she was the true successor of the Light Sacred Lady. Therefore, under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang had a dual identity. Not only was she the Light Sacred Lady, but she was also the Dark Sacred Lady. However, no one objected to such a situation. In addition, Di Beichen also selected a few deacons from some outstanding cultivators. At the same time, he also left some empty positions. If any of the new members were found to be outstanding, these positions would be reserved for them. Perhaps it was because the path of the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly was too difficult, but all the dark cultivators were obedient to Di Beichen's orders. Therefore, the entire guild proceeded in an orderly manner. Di Yujue had also instructed Di Beichen in this aspect. He believed that Di Beichen had the ability to handle these matters, but he also knew that the young master was not the head of the family and would not understand many small matters. Most of the time, these small matters had a great impact. On this day, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang had just returned from the Dark Sacred Assembly when they were informed to go to the assembly hall to discuss some matters. The two of them looked at each other, but did not stop. Instead, they hastened their footsteps and hurried to the meeting hall. Every time they went to the meeting hall, it was almost always an extremely important matter. Presumably, the head of the family had made a decision and wanted to inform everyone. When Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, they discovered that everyone was gathered here. Other than the heads of the Di family and Lin family, Lan Yunxiao, Situyen, and the others were also present. Chapter 61-74. Beichen and Hongzhuang have also arrived. Seeing the two of them, Di Yujue's expression eased a bit, revealing a trace of a smile. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang bowed and sat down at the side. Since everyone is here, then I'll get straight to the point and talk about the purpose of calling them here today. Di Yujue's voice rang out. After the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly, I believe everyone is very clear about the Jun family and Xiao family's attitude towards us. As long as there's a possibility, they'll think of a way to deal with us. Hearing Di Yujue's words, everyone's expression sank. As early as the day, they were extremely angry with Jun Hongqing and Xiao Yanlong's actions. These two fellows were constantly waiting for an opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop. As long as they were slightly careless, their memories could be stolen by them. This feeling was very unpleasant. That's right, the Jun family has been deliberately plotting to deal with us all these years. Now, the Xiao family has also been reduced to jackals of the same lair. Di Linxuan's eyes were cold. They had long wanted to remove these two malignant tumors. However, because the difference in strength between the two sides wasn't big, they had always been apprehensive. After all, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Before they had a foolproof plan, they couldn't act rashly. Otherwise, once the entire family was implicated, they would become sinners for all eternity. It was precisely because of this consideration that the Jun family had become more and more excessive over the years. Therefore, I've decided to remove this malignant tumor. Di Yujue's expression was solemn. He had already said ruthlessly that as long as his family didn't fall this time, he would definitely destroy the Jun family and Xiao family. He couldn't tolerate these fellows thinking of ways to secretly harm his family, and the only way to solve all of this was to kill them and eliminate all future troubles. Even if he had to pay a price for doing so, from a long-term point of view, this was definitely a good thing. Although the D family and the June family hadn't had any major conflicts in the past few years, there would always be many casualties due to the enmity between the two families whenever their disciples went out to train. As for the conspiracies and battles between adult cultivators, there were countless of them. They had never carefully calculated it, but the things they remembered in their minds were already a terrifying number. In the past, it was because they didn't have enough strength and confidence. But now, the D family was no longer the same as before. In addition, the June family had been hit hard several times in a row. Their strength was no longer the same as before. Making a move now was also a very good opportunity. If it weren't for the fact that the matter with the Dark Sacred Assembly had just ended and he still needed some time to deal with the family matters, he would have taken action the next day. For a moment, no one spoke. They agreed with this idea very much. Everything that Jun Hongqing had done over the years was unbearable and unforgivable. If they hadn't been lucky enough to turn misfortune into blessings every time, they really didn't know what would have happened to them now. They didn't want such things to happen again in the future. Things like luck couldn't be guaranteed. Even if they were unlucky once, it could be a devastating blow. "Father, are you going to make a move now?" Di Baichen asked aloud. Chapter 61-75. Are we just going to give up on the land of inheritance? Di Xiaofeng frowned. He was 100% in favor of exterminating the Jun family. It was just that the Jun family had always endured for the sake of the land of inheritance. With Jun Hongqing's personality, if the Jun family suffered heavy losses, he would definitely put the secret key in a place where no one could find it. At that time, the D family might never be able to open the land of inheritance. A trace of hesitation flashed through Di Yujua's eyes, and then they became resolute. Even if the land of inheritance is never opened in the future, we can't let the Jun family continue to exist. The magnetic and loud voice was filled with determination and certainty. Di Yujua's expression was calm. He had already thought about this matter carefully before. In fact, Jun Hongqing and Xiao Yanlong had been threatening him with this matter for a while. This feeling of being threatened was very uncomfortable. He didn't want the D family to be kept in check like this, so he decided to go all out. As soon as the Hell deity finished speaking, the expressions of everyone shook. They hadn't expected that Di Yujue would actually make such a decisive decision. This wasn't a small matter for the entire D family. Di Yujue turned to look at Di Linxian. "Father, Jun Hongqing and Xiao Yanlong are very clear that the secret key is our weakness. We already gave in once before, but they actually did something like this during the establishment ceremony of the Dark Sacred Assembly. It's clear that they have a trump card. If we give in again and again, it will only make their arrogance rise. If they can threaten us once, they can threaten us a second time. Rather than that, it's better to give up everything. If we can get the secret key, that's naturally the best. But if we can't, we'll have one less enemy to scheme against all day. It's a good thing for the entire family." Di Linxian fell into silence. The D family's land of inheritance had been passed down for a long time. This was already an open secret of the entire D family. He had always hoped that the land of heritage could be reopened, and Baichen was the one who could open it. He had never thought that things would develop to this point. Once the secret key disappeared, the land of heritage might never be opened again. Lan Yunxiao and the rest didn't say anything. This was the D family's matter. The choice between passing down the family's legacy and eliminating their opponents was a difficult one. It wasn't an easy choice to make. "Old Lin, what do you think?" Di Linxian turned his head to look at Lin Wenlan. He understood that everything Di Yujue said made sense, but it was really a pity to let the land of heritage become a treasure trove that could never be opened. Lin Wenlan also understood the importance of the land of heritage, so she did not make any assertions immediately. After a while, Di Linxian said, It is indeed a good decision to get rid of the June family as soon as possible. We have tolerated them for too many years. It would be a good thing if we can end them as soon as possible." Hearing this, Dyujue's eyes lit up. "Father, you agree? Before we take action, you have to think of a way to get the secret key. Although the chances of success are very small with Jun Hongcheng's craftiness, we still have to try." Lin Wenlan sighed in relief when she saw that Di Lin Xian had made his decision. "In that case, we have to prepare for battle again." Chapter 61-76. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. Neither of them expressed their opinions on this matter. In their hearts, Dyujue had always been a very calm person. However, this series of events had really touched his bottom line. In fact, if Di Beichen hadn't summoned a large number of skeletons this time, the Xiao family and the Jun family might have caused them to lose everything. They clearly remembered Dyujue's angry look at that time. It was obvious that he didn't want something like this to happen again. He didn't want this kind of variable to threaten the family's life. Even if he had to give up the land of inheritance, he wouldn't hesitate. Di Beichen felt that Dyujue's decision was correct. Although the land of inheritance was very mysterious, it was also very important to the family. However, it hadn't been opened for so many years, and the family hadn't changed much. The only regret was that they all knew that once the land of inheritance was opened, the family's cultivators' talents would be increased. This was the most amazing thing about the land of inheritance. Fortunately, the Di family's position was very stable now. With the support of the Dark Sacred Assembly, the Di family's position would only get higher and higher in the future. Sometimes, giving up was necessary. In that case, you should make a plan. When do you plan to take action? We'll set off together. Di Linxian was also a person who acted quickly. After making a decision, he didn't hesitate at all. Since they had to deal with it sooner or later, it was best to deal with it as soon as possible. Jun Hongqing might have already predicted that we would take action, so he took the opportunity to transfer some of the cultivators out and leave the family's bloodline. Lin Wenlan slowly said. This kind of action was something that every family would do when faced with a calamity. So we will take action as soon as possible. I will arrange for some of the cultivators to set off first in these 2 days. After 3 days, we will officially take action. Dyujue's tone was firm, strong, and decisive. Before he had gathered everyone, he had already made a comprehensive plan. If they wanted to destroy a family, the number of people needed would naturally not be small. If they rushed over on the same day, even with the teleportation array, it would still take a long time. After all, the teleportation array could only transport a limited number of people at a time. They simply did not have the time to waste on it. Therefore, they needed a certain amount of time to let these cultivators go in batches. When the time came, they would gather and begin the operation. All right, I'll leave it to you. Di Lin Xian nodded. Seeing this, Di Beichen also said, I'll also go to the Sacred Assembly so that everyone can make some preparations. If it was just to deal with the Jun family, then the Di family alone would be enough. However, no one knew if the Xiao family would also be involved. Therefore, the more people that went, the better. Even if the outcome was inevitable, reducing the number of casualties was still their biggest goal. I'll have to trouble the cultivators of your guild. Don't worry, father. They will be very happy. Di Beichen smiled. Currently, the Dark Sacred Assembly was developing very well. Although it had only been a few days, the joyous and harmonious appearance of everyone was not just for show. He had confidence in his Sacred Assembly. Good. Dyujue patted Di Beichen's shoulder with satisfaction. His face was full of joy. I'll leave it to you. Chapter 61-77. For a time, the Di family began to get busy again. In a short period of time, many cultivators had already received the order from the family head. After hearing this order, everyone was stunned at first, then revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Really? Is the family head really going to attack the June family? That's great. I've been unhappy with the June family for a long time. Over the years, they've become more and more annoying. I can finally take advantage of this opportunity to vent my anger. That's right. Those guys who make people sick should have died long ago. The hatred accumulated over the years had been engraved in everyone's hearts. Now that they were finally going to have a decisive battle, everyone couldn't help but be excited. Not only some young cultivators, but even some older cultivators couldn't hold back the excitement in their hearts at this moment. They were also people who had fought with the June family. Whether it was the young master's matter, the alchemy competition, or Di Kaiyuan, everything had poked at everyone's heart. Every time they learned that the mastermind behind the scenes was the June family, they couldn't wait to tear the other party into pieces. However, they also understood that the family couldn't attack without caring about anything, but they didn't expect it to happen now. Master, it seems that everyone really hates the June family. Xiao Hei couldn't help but sigh when she saw the excited expressions on everyone's faces. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. The things the June family has done over the years are indeed disgusting. It's normal for everyone to have such feelings. Di Beichun had a lot of support in the dark congregation. After he said this matter, almost all the cultivators signed up without hesitation. Young master, you don't have to make a special trip to this matter. You just have to pass the message. As long as you need it, everyone will definitely respond immediately. Huang Futing smiled. Even if many people had already changed the title of Di Beichun to president, he still maintained this title. This was because there was a contract between him and Di Beichun, a contract that he was willing to sign. This title also proved that they were closer to each other. Di Beichun smiled faintly. He had already guessed that no one would back down, but when he saw that everyone was more enthusiastic than he had imagined, he felt an indescribable satisfaction in his heart. If only Master could see this scene, it would be great. The dark cultivators had suffered a lot over the years, and now, the good times had come. Since it's such a big matter, I naturally have to come. Oh right, every participating cultivator will be rewarded. Help me take charge of this matter. Don't worry, young master. Leave this to me. After giving the orders, Di Beichun returned to the Di family. Beichun, can we take a look at the entrance to the Land of Heritage? Seeing that Di Beichun had returned, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately voiced her thoughts. Hearing this, Di Beichun raised his eyebrows slightly. Why do you suddenly want to go take a look? We've been waiting for a chance to enter the Land of Heritage, but after this incident, we may never have the chance to enter again. So, I want to take a look at the entrance. I also want to know if there are any other ways to open the Land of Heritage other than the secret key. They all agreed with their father's approach, but they couldn't help but feel pity for such an opportunity. Di Beichun's lips curled up slightly, and he suddenly stretched out his hand. Chapter 61-78. Since it's a place my wife wants to go, why not? Di Beichun held her soft little hand and slowly walked towards the back of the mountain. He also wanted to see what the entrance to the Land of Heritage looked like. As a person with the cursed body, he had always been regarded as the only hope to enter the Land of Heritage. However, no one would have thought that this place would become a place where they could no longer enter. The Di family's territory was very large. Even though they had lived here for so long, there were still some places that they had never been to. As the two of them walked to the back of the mountain, they realized that there were still cultivators from the Di family guarding the place. Young master, madam. The guard bowed respectfully. Let's go up and take a look. Yes. The back of the mountain was very large and surrounded by mountain peaks. It was not very conspicuous among the mountains. However, this was an extremely important place for the Di family to pass down their heritage. Today's sunlight was very faint. It was bright but not dazzling. As it shone on the body, it gave off a sense of warmth. Accompanied by a gentle breeze, the smell of grass wafted to the tip of their noses. It was comfortable and relaxing. Such good weather, it's really suitable for going out. Bailey Hongzhuang spread out her hands and allowed the breeze to caress her body. It was as if her whole body could float with the wind. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face, Di Beichen's gaze became even gentler. Fortunately, he had such a cute person by his side all this time. Let's continue. Opening her eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang naturally held Di Beichen's hand. That warm feeling made her heart calm down. The smile on Di Beichen's lips never disappeared. Even if he was just quietly looking at Bailey Hongzhuang like this, it was a kind of happiness. Soon, the two of them arrived at the land of heritage. In front of them was a circular altar-like existence. It was entirely made of white jade and faintly had a hint of cyan antiquity. The entire altar was very large and gave off a sense of grandeur and magnificence. The moment he arrived, a heavy sense of history hit him in the face. Everything here had a sense of vicissitudes of history. Vaguely, Bailey Hongzhuang actually felt that everything here was very similar to when she had entered the Darkness Temple and Radiant Saint Hall. Even though everything here looked simple, the feeling it gave her was very similar. What a magical place! Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. Di Beichen looked at the scene in front of him and was also shocked. This altar looked very simple. There weren't many complicated totems, and it didn't have the mysterious aura of an ordinary altar. It looked simple and ordinary. Perhaps it was because it was too simple that it gave off a feeling of returning to simplicity. The circular altar was enshrouded in white mist, and there was only a small round base in the center. This circular tray was very delicate. It was circular in shape, but it was split into two in the middle. However, there was a gap in the most important position, so the two halves were still connected. Noticing this, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. If I'm not wrong, this should be the place where the blood fuses, right? Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen, her eyes filled with curiosity. Di Beichen nodded slightly. That should be the case. The two of them walked to the back of the altar. There was a huge stone door here. Chapter 61-79. Obviously, this should be the place where the three keys were placed. Thinking back, it was really strange back then. The keys to your family's inheritance fell into the hands of the three families. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. Thinking back, the three family heads should have been on very good terms. She didn't expect that after so many years, they would become enemies. If the three seniors knew about the current situation, they would be very disappointed. However, time had changed too many things. Even families that had always been very close would change because of some accumulated resentment. Hearing this, Di Beichen nodded slightly. I also think this is very interesting. Back then, it seemed that the ancestors of the three families had discovered this place together. However, in the end, it became our family's land of inheritance. However, the things in this land of inheritance are not only for our families. Although the land of inheritance hasn't been opened for many years, I've checked the previous records. It said that every time the land of inheritance opened, the three families would reap great rewards. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. So everyone's land of inheritance is a very good opportunity for the three families. Indeed. However, the gap between the opening of the land of inheritance became longer and longer. Perhaps it has something to do with the deterioration of the relationship between the three families. Di Beichen's gaze was distant. Because of this land of inheritance, the three families had developed to this stage. Thinking about how this land of inheritance might not be opened again in the future, he felt a little uncomfortable. The Jun family had been protecting the three great families for such a long time. From now on, the Jun family would completely disappear from this world. Their primary goal was to get rid of the Jun family. After that, the Shao family would be the next step in their plan. After so many years of friendship, in just a few short years, it had deteriorated to this extent. But who could say whether it was right or wrong? Everyone stood on their own standpoints and made decisions for the good of the family. Just like how the Jun family and the Xiao family tried to deal with them, in order to protect their families, they could only destroy each other. Bailey Hongzhuang quietly looked at the totem in front of her. She only felt that the place where the 3 keys were placed was very mysterious. This totem had an indescribable aura of simplicity. Beichen, don't you think this totem looks familiar, as if you've seen it somewhere before? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. She didn't know why she had such a feeling, but she couldn't control it. Di Beichen slowly walked closer and his gaze fell on the place where Bailey Hongzhuang was looking. With this look, his heart seemed to be touched for a moment. It was as if he had seen something that had been deeply imprinted in his heart many years ago. It was an indescribable sense of familiarity. Most importantly, the resonance from the bottom of his heart was a feeling he had never felt before. How could this be? Di Beichen stared at the ancient totem in a daze, his mind blank. He had no way to think about whether he had really seen such a totem before. What he was more curious about was why he had such a strong feeling. What happened? Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that Di Beichen's expression was different from usual, and a look of concern appeared on her face. Chapter 6180. Di Beichen did not answer Bailey Hongzhuang, and simply stared at the ancient totem in the same posture. An indescribable sense of familiarity filled his heart. He felt as if he had once lost a piece of his heart, and the totem in front of him was related to the missing part. Bailey Hongzhuang sized up Di Beichen. She did not understand why Di Beichen had suddenly become like this, but she also knew that the latter must have fallen into a strange state of mind. This situation was similar to the time when Di Beichen suddenly had an epiphany in front of the gate of the Darkness Shrine. This was the inheritance of the Di family, and Di Beichen was the fated person who was most likely to unlock this inheritance. Hence, such emotions were not strange. However, why did Di Beichen's expression look so sad? It was a kind of sadness that emanated from the bottom of his heart, as if it was an unbearable pain in life. Even despair would not be this bad. She slowly shifted her gaze away from Di Beichen and looked at the totem again. There had always been a kind of complicated emotion in her heart, and she felt as if she had really seen this totem somewhere before. Most importantly, she did not know if she had been affected by Di Beichen's emotions, but there was also an indescribable sadness that spread in her heart. She stared at the totem, and when she came back to her senses, she suddenly realized that she had unknowingly burst into tears. How could this be? Bailey Hongzhuang wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. It was clearly the first time she had come to this place, so where exactly did these emotions come from? At the same time, Di Beichen also came back to his senses, and his eyes turned red. It was obvious that he had been suppressing the emotions in his heart previously. Di Beichen turned his gaze, and found that Bailey Hongzhuang was actually crying, and his heart tightened. "Dear, what's wrong?" Seeing the concern on Di Beichen's face, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. When she saw Di Beichen's expression earlier, she suddenly felt that it was a little strange, and at this moment, he was the one who had always been by her side. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and shook her head. "I'm fine. I don't know what happened just now, but when I looked at this totem, my heart felt very sad. You too, right?" she said in a certain tone, because Di Beichen's expression from earlier was deeply imprinted in her heart. Di Beichen did not deny it. Looking at this totem, there is indeed a very strange feeling. Perhaps we have been affected by the emotions of the land of heritage. Back then, the 3 great clans were on such good terms, but in the end they ended up like this. That's why even the land of heritage felt sad. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang fell into deep thought. Was it really like this? She did not know. Since we are already here, we see if we Beichen's blood, we can't. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her willowy eyebrows, her eyes filled with interest. All this time, only the blood of the Di family and Xiao family cultivators could light up the land of heritage. Once the blood successfully opened the land of heritage, then they only needed to place the 3 secret keys on it, and the land of heritage would open. Although they did not have the 3 secret keys now, if they were lucky this time, they might be able to gather all of them. This way, the D family would no longer need to be kept in check in the future. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's excited look, Di Beichen smiled and replied, "All right." The dagger drew across, and the blood immediately dripped into the round tray. Chapter 61-81. The blood on both sides gradually began to fuse through the gap in the middle. Gradually, the blood turned from its initial bright red color to a faint golden color, as if half of a gold leaf had been dissolved in it. It looked extremely dazzling. The more blood fused, the more intense the golden color became. In the end, all the blood had turned into a dazzling golden color and emitted a mysterious aura. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other as they watched this scene curiously. They had only heard from Di Yujue that there would be a certain change after the blood of both parties fused, but they never thought that it would be such a change. Wow, how magical! Xiao He looked at the situation in the round tray in astonishment. This was the first time she had seen such a thing. It was indeed worthy of being called the land of inheritance of a large family. "Master, since the blood has changed, does that mean that we can use your blood to open the land of inheritance?" Xiao He looked curious. It would be impossible for an ordinary person's blood to fuse into this place to cause such a change, right? Di Beichen's face showed a thoughtful expression. "Although I have always said that I wanted to give it a try because of the secret key, I did not come. Father also did not explain this matter too clearly, so I don't know what is considered a success. In fact, it had been hundreds of years since the last time the land of inheritance was opened. Everything could only be found in the ancient books of the family. I vaguely remember that when Big Brother mentioned it, he said that if the blood of both parties turned black after the fusion, it would be a success." Di Beichen frowned and his eyes were filled with hesitation. "Maybe I remembered wrongly." "Black?" Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and felt a little disappointed. If it was black, then the color of their blood was obviously not right. Noticing the faint disappointment in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, Di Beichen smiled. "At that time, Big Brother only mentioned it casually, so I didn't remember it clearly. It won't be too late to ask Father when we get back later. What do you think?" Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "All right." Piercing Wind City. Xiao Yanlong stood in the courtyard with a worried look on his face. Ever since the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly and his return, he had been worried about a problem. How was Di Yujue's attitude that day resolved? He was certain that Di Yujue had the intention to kill him. After being friends for so many years, he knew Di Yujue's character very well. He had always been a swift and decisive person. He hadn't made a move before, partly because he had many concerns, and partly because he hadn't made up his mind. When he was in the Dark Sacred Assembly, he clearly felt Di Yujue's killing intent. With his character, it was impossible for him to change his mind after making such a decision. Moreover, when he faced Junhong Qing, Di Yujue had made it very clear that he would no longer be restricted by the secret key. In that case, Di Yujue would most likely take action very soon. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but panic. Facing the current Di family and the Dark Sacred Assembly, once they launched an attack, they wouldn't be able to stop them at all. After this incident, their former allies had unknowingly distanced themselves from them. Isolated and helpless, this was the true portrayal of their current situation. Just as Xiao Yanlong was thinking, he unexpectedly saw Junhong Qing. Chapter 61-82. Seeing Junhong Qing's appearance, Xiao Yanlong already had a rough guess in his heart, but his face still showed a surprised expression. Junhong Qing's mood was also very complicated. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang told him the news that day, he carefully calculated the time and asked some cultivators who had some understanding of this matter, but the results he got made him very suspicious. However, He didn't have the time to measure all of this now. At this critical moment of the Jun family's life and death, he only thought about how to get the family through this difficult time. Brother Xiao, I think you understand the current situation very well. Diyu Jue is probably already preparing to take action. Jun Hongqing didn't say anything else, but went straight to the point. He came here today to ask for Xiao Yanlong's help. Ever since the incident with the Dark Sacred Assembly, he knew that this time it was really dangerous. If he couldn't find a way to get through this difficult time, perhaps the Jun family would really cease to exist in the future. He had never thought of this kind of result, and when this scene really happened in front of him, he also felt that it was very difficult to accept. Almost immediately, he had been looking for allies everywhere, but at this moment, those families who had a good relationship with him all pretended that they weren't familiar with him. Even if he proposed a very high reward, the other party's attitude was still resolute, and they weren't willing to relent at all. After repeated attempts, he found that the other party didn't want to take the opportunity to extort him, and his heart was filled with despair. The D family's rise now made many families fearful, and everyone was worried that they would get into trouble. If their families were implicated because of this matter, that was something that no one wanted to see. On the other hand, it was also because Di Beichen had a good relationship with the young masters of the Jiang family and the Murong family. If he wanted to deal with the Di family, the risk he would have to bear was too great. In a situation where it didn't concern them, there were simply not enough benefits to attract them to do it. After thinking about it, he only had the Xiao family left as an ally. Hearing Jun Hongqing's words, Xiao Yanlong sighed in his heart. I also guessed this point. If the Di family takes action, the Lin family will definitely take action as well. As long as the Dark Sacred Assembly also joins in, with our strength, it will be really difficult. I know it's very difficult, but we have no way out. Jun Hongqing's face was serious and dignified. If this battle can't be avoided, we can only use all of our strength. Once our family disappears, the next ones to be dealt with will be you. His gaze was fixated on Xiao Yanlong's body. At this time, the Xiao family definitely could not leave just like that. Once the Xiao family also retreated, they would really be a dead end. Seeing this, Xiao Yanlong also nodded seriously. I understand what you mean. The Di clan is not only targeting you, but also me. This time, we have no choice but to fight. After hearing Zhao's words, the family's the family's and the family's. This was rights, this was a blessing, was the family's family. They were grasshoppers on the same rope, so the Xiao family would also go all out. Even if their chances of winning weren't high, at least it wouldn't be too bad. Brother Xiao, thank you. Jun Hongqing's eyes were deep, and there was a flicker of light in them. Chapter 6183. If we use the secret key as our final trump card, will there be a chance for us to survive? Jun Hongqing was a little uncertain. All along, they knew how important the secret key was to the Di family. Every time the secret key was mentioned, Di Yujue would be very concerned. However, when Di Yujue said those words that day, the resolute expression on his face did not seem to be fake in the slightest. Speaking of which, we really took a wrong step this time. That's why we've fallen into this situation. Xiao Yanlong sighed. Di Yujue must be concerned about the secret key. It's only because our actions this time almost caused the Di family to be completely wiped out that he made such a decisive decision. Who would have thought that Lei Ming and the others would be so useless? Jun Hongqing's face was full of annoyance. At that time, everything was clearly calculated and the entire plan could be said to be flawless. However, he did not think that the 5 presidents would be so useless. If they had brought more experts with them at that time, things would not have been so bad. Although the skeleton is very scary, as long as we had stopped Di Beichen's actions before, so many things would not have happened later. Failed at the last step. Jun Hongqing could not help but regret the moment he thought of the situation that day. If he had known that this would be the result, he would never have done that. No matter what, we'll think of another way when the time comes. If the secret key can be exchanged for a chance of survival, that would be the best. Xiao Yanlong's expression was complicated. Faintly, he felt that the possibility of Du Jue agreeing was very small. However, the land of heritage was still very important to the D family. Until that moment, no one would know what the result would be. Jun Hongqing nodded slightly. This was the only thing they could do now. After Xiao Yanlong promised to lead the family's disciples to the Jun family tomorrow, Jun Hongqing was completely relieved. In this kind of isolated and helpless situation, as long as they were not fighting alone, at least they would have more confidence. After seeing Jun Hongqing leave, Xiao Sudong walked to Xiao Yanlong's side. Father, should I inform the elders to make preparations? Xiao Sudong's expression was complicated. In just a few days, he felt that his thoughts were completely different from before. This was because he realized that the family that he had always felt was incomparably strong could now disappear at any time. This feeling made him feel very panicked. Ever since he was a child, he had never thought that something like this would happen to him. Now, as the distance between him and Di Beichen got closer and closer, he realized that the gap between him and Di Beichen was so big. Whether it was Di Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, or his sister, they were all much more than he was. When they encountered such a situation, they would at least have their own opinions. But now, his mind was blank. He did not know what he could do for the family's sakes. The only thing he could do was to listen to his father's orders and do what he could. Xiao Yanlong shook his head. Su Dong, I have a mission for you. Chapter 6184. How can I take everyone away at this time? Xiao Sudong found it hard to believe. Although he knew very well that he couldn't do anything for the Xiao family with his current strength, he had already thought about it. If all of this was destined to come, then he would persevere until the end. Even if he had to pay with his life, as long as he was with everyone, he would not be afraid. However, wasn't what his father wanted him to do now? Xiao Yanlong looked at Xiao Sudong seriously and said, Sudong, you are my only son and also the young master of the Xiao family. Perhaps after this time, the Xiao family will be completely removed from the upper realm, but as long as you are still here, and some of the young cultivators of our family are still here, at least the bloodline of our Xiao family still exists in this world. No, I can't agree. Xiao Sudong shook his head. I want to live and die with you. Looking at the determined Xiao Sudong, the corners of Xiao Yanlong's lips slowly raised into a smile. I know I have never misjudged you. Ever since Soa's talent in the light attribute was discovered, I have been focusing on her cultivation. You are obviously my son, but you have never complained about what I have done. Until now, you still have the heart of a pure child. Xiao Yanlong was somewhat gratified. In the past, he had always felt that Sudong was not capable and could not be independent. Now it seemed that such simple emotions were more difficult for everyone to achieve. Father, I have never minded these things. Xiao Sudong's face was calm. Sister's talent is indeed more outstanding than mine. As long as the family can be good, I don't care about these things at all. Yes, if only I could have understood these things earlier. Xiao Yanlong sighed. If he could have listened to Sudong's thoughts earlier, perhaps they would not have reached this point. Unfortunately, the situation had already become like this, and he did not know if there was still a chance to change it. There was no point in regretting it. Father, I don't want to leave. Sister needs to be protected the most now. Let sister take everyone away. Xiao Sudong said. Your sister will leave. She is pregnant, and the Jun family will not let her stay here. Then isn't it fine? Let sister take everyone away. I want to stay here. Xiao Sudong said seriously. No. Xiao Yanlong's voice was resolute. You must leave. There is no doubt about this. Father! If you don't leave, from today onwards, you and I are no longer father and son. Xiao Yanlong's voice was cold and stern. His eyes turned red, revealing anger and pain that he was enduring. Looking at Xiao Yanlong like this, Xiao Sudong's eyes gradually became moist. How could he not understand that his father was doing this for him to survive? But this kind of life was not what he wanted. Sudong, for the entire family, the most important thing is to leave behind the bloodline. It was because he had done something wrong that he brought disaster to his family. As my son, you have an obligation to help me make up for this mistake. Hearing this, Xiao Sudong looked at Xiao Yanlong in a daze. Such words indeed made it impossible for him to refute. After a short while, Xiao Sudong nodded, and his voice was filled with reluctance and forbearance. Father, I'll definitely bring everyone out safely. Chapter 61-85. If the Xiao family has the chance to escape this disaster, you can come back. Xiao Yanlong's lips curled into a smile. It was clearly a smile, but Xiao Sudong felt unusually bitter. After settling everything, Xiao Yanlong did not tell anyone and quietly left the family. The Di family. When Di Yujue heard the news from the cultivators, his expression became very complicated. Yujue, Patriarch Xiao came to look for you at this time. Could it be that they've already noticed our movements? Lin Yunqing's eyes were filled with thoughts. They had been very careful with their movements this time and hoped that they would not alert the enemy. However, they knew very well that with so many cultivators heading there, it would naturally be a big commotion. It would be very difficult for them not to be noticed. Di Yujue looked out of the house with deep eyes. He looked like he was in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He should have guessed my movements long ago. The reason why he came here today is probably to negotiate with me. Di Yujue slowly said. Do you plan to meet him? Lin Yunqing sized up Di Yujue's expression. She knew her husband very well. Usually, as long as it was Di Yujue who made a decision, he would never change it. No matter what Xiao Yanlong said today, it would be useless. Meet him? Why not? Di Yujue chuckled, but there was no smile in his eyes. Since he dares to come here alone, how can I let him come here for nothing? Lin Yunqing did not say anything else when she saw Di Yujue's strange expression. She clearly remembered the scene of Di Yujue and Xiao Yanlong drinking and chatting happily a few years ago. However, no one expected that in just a few years, the relationship between the two parties had deteriorated to such an extent. Now that she recalled the scenes from back then, it felt like a lifetime had passed. Soon, Xiao Yanlong's figure appeared in the Di family. When the cultivators of the Di family saw him, they could not help but feel puzzled. Patriarch Xiao? Why is he here today? They might be here to beg for mercy. With the strength of the Xiao clan, they are no match for us. It's useless to beg for mercy now. After doing so many terrible things, it would be too easy if he could be let off just by begging for mercy. Facing Xiao Yanlong, no one had a good expression. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mu Lingbing were passing by. When they noticed Xiao Yanlong's appearance, their expressions changed slightly. Hongzhuang? Isn't that the head of the Xiao family? Mu Lingbing was surprised. According to their plan, they were going to attack the Jun family in 2 days. According to their judgment, the Xiao clan would definitely help when the time came. Therefore, when the time came for them to take action, the two families would have to deal with them together. For Xiao Yanlong to appear here at such a sensitive time, his intentions were indeed worthy of consideration. Xiao Yanlong should also be very clear that once he fights with our clan, he will definitely lose, so he wants to seek peace. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. She understood the tricks of these people very well. Doesn't that mean that he betrayed the Jun family? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. In a life-and-death situation like this, it's normal for him to make such a decision. Chapter 61-86. Noticing Mu Lingbing's expression, Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled softly. Her mother had never been a scheming person. Sometimes it was hard to change one's nature. Even after experiencing so much pain, Mu Lingbing had always maintained her perseverance. If the head of the D family agrees to Xiao Yanlong's request for peace, then we only need to deal with the Jun family when we fight. If we use this method of taking them down one by one, won't we win faster? Mu Lingbing raised an eyebrow. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Mother, it's rare for you to come up with such an idea. Hearing this, Mu Lingbing was a little embarrassed. I've been listening to the fights between the mixed martial arts families, and I feel that it's impossible not to use some brains. It wasn't easy being the head of the family. Pulling one hair could affect the whole family. Once a wrong decision was made, it could affect the entire family. Actually, this is a good idea. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Although the Xiao family and the Jun family had always been in an alliance, she knew that this so-called alliance wasn't solid enough. Both of them were selfish people who had always been thinking for their own interests. As long as there was a better way out, they would abandon the other without hesitation. Therefore, if they wanted to take them down one by one, it would be very simple. But I don't think Father will agree. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Why? Because Father is fundamentally different from them. Inside the room, Diyujia looked at Xiao Yanlong outside the door, his expression calm. He spread his hands casually. Sit, this is your favorite chrysanthemum tea. A simple and ordinary sentence touched Xiao Yanlong's complicated heart. He still remembered that every time he came, Diyujia would always prepare his favorite tea. It was the same scene, but the situation was completely different. Xiao Yanlong didn't say anything. He quietly walked to the chair next to Diyujia and picked up the tea with familiarity. After taking a sip, his expression relaxed. It's still the same taste as before. With just one sentence, the two of them had different feelings in their hearts. I didn't expect you to come to me at this time, Diyujia said slowly. Actually, I didn't want to come either. Xiao Yanlong chuckled, the curve of his lips revealing a hint of ridicule. But when the family's life and death is at stake, I have no choice but to come. We've known each other for so long. You should know my personality very well. You should also know that my decision will not change. Diyujia faintly glanced at Xiao Yanlong. After being friends for so many years, they still had this bit of tacit understanding. I know. Xiao Yanlong nodded and slowly put the tea aside. However, I still want to give it a try. In the next moment, Xiao Yanlong turned his head and looked seriously at Diyujia, saying, Brother Di, we have been friends for so many years. For so many years, we have always supported each other. I know that I have done many wrong things in the past few years. I only hope that you can remember our old friendship and let us live. Diyujia looked at the urgency on Xiao Yanlong's face and suddenly said, Actually, I also didn't expect that we would end up like this. Our two families have been friends for many years. For so many years, we have always helped and supported each other. Chapter 61-87. Xiao Yanlong's expression was serious. During this period of time, I will find a way to make up for the losses caused to the D family. Make up for it? Diyujia chuckled. Things have already happened, there's no use in trying to make up for it. Back then, when Beichen broke off the engagement, I also said that I would find a way to make it up to you, but you refused without hesitation, didn't you? His deep eyes were filled with dark clouds. After being brothers for decades, he never thought that there would be a day when they would meet on the battlefield. However, the one who made this decision in the first place was Xiao Yanlong. Xiao Yanlong's voice faltered as he recalled Diyujui's apologetic expression. Compared to what the Xiao family had done, the D family's breaking off of the engagement was nothing. Xiao Yanlong opened his mouth, his face a little pale. I know that I was wrong. In fact, I've been regretting it since a long time ago. However, there's no medicine for regret in this world, and I have no way to change all of this. I can only continue to make mistakes step by step until I've made a terrible mistake in the end. Brother D, on account of our many years of friendship, can you be magnanimous and let us go? I promise that I'll never do anything to harm the D family in the future, never. Xiao Yanlong's face was serious. He did not tell anyone today and had come here alone. No matter what request Di Yujue made, he would find a way to satisfy all of it, as long as they could live. Di Yujue looked calmly at Xiao Yanlong's solemn vow and suddenly said, I'm very sorry that the relationship between our families has become like this, but I can no longer trust you. From the moment you stabbed Beichen and the others, there was no room for negotiation between our two families. He clearly remembered the scene of Jun Hongqing and Xiao Yanlong trying to kill Beichen and the others that day. If it were not for the fact that these two children had amazing abilities, they might have lost their lives at that time. Xiao Yanlong's expression shook. Thinking about it carefully, he also felt very ashamed. Brother D, I can guarantee that such a thing will never happen again. I can guarantee it with my life. Xiao Yanlong's expression was serious. No matter what you need me to do, I can do it. In fact, your family's biggest enemy over the years has been the Jun family. As long as the Jun family disappears, everything will be resolved. As for what I have done, I will think of a way to make up for it. I will definitely not be your enemy in the future. I can give you all the things in our clan's resource room. Other than that, you can state any conditions you want. I can even give up my position as the Xiao clan's patriarch, as long as you let us live. Xiao Yanlong nervously looked at Di Yujue. He was already at the end of his rope. If Di Yujue did not agree, he was not optimistic about the upcoming battle. He had even thought of disbanding the family and letting everyone escape. However, the family had its dignity. Once he did that, the entire Xiao clan would become a complete joke. Unless they lived in seclusion forever and no longer used the surname Xiao, even if the Xiao clan really had the chance to rise in the future, they would not be able to establish themselves in the upper realm. How could he let all the fame that the Xiao clan had built up over the years be ruined just like that? Looking at the anxious Xiao Yanlong, Di Yujue sighed in his heart. Chapter 6188. Perhaps it was because he had been with Jun Hongqing for a long time, so he didn't even feel the slightest bit ashamed to say such shameless things. There's no need to say any more. I've already decided on this matter. Brother D. Di Yujue raised his hand and stopped Xiao Yanlong's words. Don't call me that. We're no longer brothers. If you really cared about our family's many years of friendship, you wouldn't have attacked Beichen. If the Dark Sacred Assembly hadn't been established successfully this time, you and Jun Hongqing would have crushed my entire family without hesitation. Do you think you would hesitate? Di Yujue stared at Xiao Yanlong. Before the latter could speak, his voice had already sounded. No, you definitely wouldn't. It's not that I haven't given you a chance. Don't you know that begging for mercy when you're at the end of your rope is the most meaningless? Don't say such useless words. It will only make me look down on you even more. Di Yujue's eyes were cold, and his resolute and fierce appearance no longer had the slightest bit of brotherly love from the past. No matter who it was, as long as they touched his reverse scale, they would die. He wouldn't let his family fall into a dangerous situation because of a plea. If it weren't for the fact that he wasn't decisive enough when dealing with the Jun family, there wouldn't have been so many twists and turns later. Xiao Yanlong stood in place in a daze. He didn't expect that he would get such an answer after throwing away his self-esteem to beg for mercy. A thick sense of humiliation began to linger in his heart. Di Yujue's every word pierced deeply into his heart. Okay, since you've made up your mind, then we can only meet on the battlefield. Xiao Yanlong nodded and put away his previous begging appearance. His expression once again returned to its usual deep state. Between us, there's only meeting on the battlefield. Today, I won't kill you. The next time we meet, you'll die by my hands. Di Yujue stared at Xiao Yanlong, and the scene of them meeting for the first time when they were young flashed in his mind. Now it really felt like a lifetime ago. Xiao Yanlong's body trembled, and his leaving footsteps paused slightly. Then, he took another step and firmly left. The 3-day agreement arrived in the blink of an eye. During these 3 days, the cultivators of the D family, the Lin family, and the dark sacred congregation were all rushing to the Jun family's residence. It was only on the last day that Di Baichen and the others left with Di Yujue and the others. Baichen, I heard that the cultivators of the Jun family seemed to have realized what was going to happen. That's why the Shao family has been sending cultivators to meet up with them. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. The cultivators of the dark sacred assembly were all over the upper realm. Now they were very well informed. Di Baichen nodded slightly. Xiao Yanlong came to see father first. Although I don't know what they talked about, Xiao Yanlong should have already known about this at that time. So today's battle will be an all-out attack from both sides. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed faintly. She had never been to the Jun family before. She didn't expect to see such a scene on her first visit. Today, rivers of blood were destined to flow. The eyes of everyone present shone with a dazzling light. After so many years of enduring, they were finally going to have a good fight. In order to remove the Jun family from the upper realm, they had been preparing for too long. After the Bailey family learned about this situation, they also came. Chapter 6189. Jun Family. Jun Hongqing stood at the back of the mountain. A gentle breeze blew, lifting up a corner of his clothes. Xiao Yanlong stood beside him, and both of their faces were indescribably dignified. If I'm not wrong, they should start taking action today, Jun Hongqing slowly said. Since he became the head of the family, he had always hoped that one day he would be able to kill the D family, but he didn't expect that this scene would actually happen to him. It wasn't the D family that was facing extermination, but them. Xiao Yanlong's expression was complicated. Ever since he talked with Di Yujue, his mood became even more complicated. They had to fight with their backs to the wall. They had no way out. If they couldn't withstand it today, the two families would be completely finished. Let's go down, everyone is waiting for us. Jun Hongqing nodded slightly. Sei Wu and the others have safely left, right? Don't worry, I have already arranged for them to leave. The place they found is very hidden. As long as they live in anonymity, they shouldn't be discovered. Xiao Yanlong's expression had a trace of gentleness. As long as Su Dong and the others were safe and sound, it could be considered as settling one of their worries. After Di Baichen and the others arrived, the cultivators who had arrived earlier rushed out and joined the team. In the blink of an eye, the team continued to expand, and finally, the momentum of an army was monstrous. After the cultivators of Junyang City saw the Di family and the Lin family's teams gather, their faces were filled with fear. I said that there were too many cultivators here in the past 2 days. I didn't understand at first, but now it seems that the Di family is preparing to attack the Jun family. A cultivator couldn't help but exclaim. The hatred between the two families had lasted for too many years, and everyone had almost become accustomed to it. However, no one thought that there would be such a day. My God, then won't a war break out in the Jun family today? Perhaps after today, the Jun family will no longer exist? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. This sudden situation was too terrifying. No one had expected such a thing to happen. This unexpected feeling made their hearts tremble. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Some cultivators had already started contacting their families. Based on this situation, they would not rest until one of them was dead. In order to avoid being implicated, it would be safer for them to leave Junyang City as soon as possible. Otherwise, once they were affected by the flames of war between the two families, they wouldn't even have a place to cry. Di Yujue looked at the group of cultivators behind him. His dignified and handsome face was unprecedentedly serious. He stared at the familiar faces in front of him and spoke clearly into everyone's ears. The Jun family has been plotting against us all these years. I don't know how many cultivators have died in their schemes. For the sake of avenging the fallen cultivators, and for the sake of preventing the future descendants of the clan from having to face this kind of trouble, we must completely remove this malignant tumor today. Dyujue's words were very simple, without any unnecessary embellishments. But it was these simple words that shocked everyone, and the blood in their bodies was instantly ignited. They knew very well how uncomfortable it was to be on guard all these years. As long as they could completely solve this problem, everything would be worth it. Remove this malignant tumor. Destroy the Jun family. Chapter 6190. The teams of the D family, Lin family, and the Dark Sacred Assembly walked in the direction of the Jun family. The cultivators of the entire Junyang city scattered like birds and beasts, rushing to pass the news. They really came. Hearing the news from his subordinates, Junhong Cheng looked awe-inspiring. There was no emotional fluctuation on his calm face, but everyone knew that the family master was very uncomfortable in his heart. Boom! With a shocking explosion, the Jun family's door was blown open directly. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the destructive power of her bomb, and her eyes showed satisfaction. Ever since she came to the upper realm, she had rarely used explosive. This was because everyone was very strong, and the power of explosives might not be able to achieve good result. However, it was quite suitable to blow up other things. When the surrounding cultivators saw Bailey Hongzhuang taking out the explosives, they were a little puzzled. They didn't understand what she was going to do. Explosives were rare in the upper realm. Except for some low-level people who might use them to build houses, they didn't use them at all, because the power of explosives was too small for them. However, when everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang threw an explosive and blew up the Jun family's door directly, their eyes showed surprise. This explosive seems to be a little different from the explosives in their impression. Sure enough, everything that second cousin-in-law takes out is different. Lin Yi was very calm. She felt that a lot of common sense was useless on Bailey Hongzhuang because the things in their impression were always different from the things that Hongzhuang took out. Dyujue's eyes also lit up after noticing the power of this explosive. Although this power was not enough for them now, it was still useful for cultivators with slightly lower cultivation. If they brought a few of these explosives when they went out for training, wouldn't it be a talisman? Not only Dyujue, but Di Linxian and Lin Wenlan also had the same idea in their mind. When they returned, they had to bring up this idea. After all, these young cultivators were the future mainstays of the family. After the door was blown open, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could clearly see the Jun family's appearance. The structure of the Jun family was very similar to that of the D family. In fact, the structure of the Jun family was very similar to that of the D family. It was only due to the different preferences of the families that the styles differed. However, after everyone blew the door open, they found that the cultivators from the Jun family and the Xiao family were all holding weapons in their hands, ready to fight. Clearly, the other party already knew of their actions and was prepared to fight to the death. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Both teams stared at each other without blinking. Killing intent surged between the two sides. Everyone only had one thought in their hearts, and that was to kill each other. Junhong Cheng and Xiao Yanlong's figures flashed and appeared in front of the group. Their gazes landed on Dyujue and the others. "We meet again." Dyujue sneered at the corner of his lips, looking at the two with ridicule. Junhong Cheng stared at Dyujue and the team behind him. His face was gloomy and dignified. "I didn't expect. We are really going to fight." Chapter 6191. Junhong Cheng looked at the calm Dyujue, his heart filled with mixed feelings. He had been looking forward to the day when the two sides would meet on the battlefield. He wanted to make a comeback and free himself from the relationship between the three great families that had always been suppressed. He wanted to surpass the D family and become the family with the most authority. However, he never thought that the D family would attack them in the end. What he didn't expect was that even after he roped in the Xiao family, they were still at an absolute disadvantage. Jue, as long as you don't fight today, I can guarantee that I will never be your enemy in the future. After a long while, Junhong Cheng slowly said this sentence. Looking at the cultivators of the family, he couldn't help but feel distressed. He couldn't bear to see them die. Hearing this, Jue chuckled, his eyes filled with mockery. Haven't you always done this before? On the surface, you've never been our enemy, but behind our backs, you've always schemed against us. Thanks to you, many terrible things have happened to our family over the years. Junhong Cheng was silent. I know that what happened before was my fault. Now, I can swear that the D family will never have any conflicts with the Jun family, whether it's on the surface or in the dark. Don't put on this show. It's useless to me. Jue didn't give Junhong Cheng any more time to talk. He was tired of hearing these words. Just like what Xiao Yanlong said to him, it was meaningless to him, who had already made up his mind. His cold and resolute voice directly interrupted Junhong Cheng's words. His expression was very ugly, but it couldn't change anything. Even if I use the secret key in exchange? Junhong Cheng took out his last trump card. You should know how important this is to your family. I said, I don't care. Jue's lips curled into a cold smile. It's because I believed your nonsense that the D family was almost wiped out. Although the secret key has been passed down for a long time, without you, the D family would have developed very well. Junhong Cheng's complexion turned ashen. He regretted what he had done on the day the Dark Sacred Assembly was established even more. Jue's words made him understand that there was no turning back. His gaze gradually became malicious and ruthless. In that case, let's fight. Junhong Cheng glared at Jue. Do you really think that the D family is invincible? If we really fight, you will know that we are not easy to deal with. A bone is just a bone. No matter how hard it is to chew, it will be chewed up sooner or later, Jue said calmly. Junhong Cheng coldly snorted and quietly exchanged glances with Xiao Yanlong. Both of them nodded at the same time. Attack! Chase them all out! The battle began at this moment. The elders of the Jun family and the Xiao family came out in full force. The elders of the D family and the Lin family also rushed forward. After the family heads and elders began to fight, a group of cultivators also rushed forward, unwilling to be outdone. They had been waiting for this battle for too long. With so many people's elemental energy surging together, even the elemental energy in the air seemed to be affected. The hatred between the three families had accumulated for too many years. Whether it was the young cultivators or the elders, their killing intent towards each other had never disappeared. Chapter 6192. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure moved and directly rushed into the battle. She also didn't have any good feelings towards these two families. In just a few years, she had been schemed against by these two families many times. Now that she had the chance, she naturally wouldn't show mercy. Xiao He and Xiao Bai enlarged their bodies and sent a few cultivators flying with a punch. On the day the Dark Sacred Assembly was established, these guys had thought of ways to slaughter the cultivators of the D family and the Lin family. Every dog has its day. Now it was finally their turn. Ling transformed into a dragon once again. With a sweep of her dragon tail, a large number of cultivators were sent flying as if they had been hit by a heavy blow. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the divine dragon tail whip was completely unleashed. Ling still remembered the grudge from last time. How could she not take revenge this time? Unlike last time, Junhong Cheng and the others couldn't deal with them at all. Just dealing with Jue and the others' attacks was already very difficult. They could only watch helplessly as their own cultivators were massacred. No matter how anxious they were, they couldn't do anything. Xiren, Shangguan Yingying, Mo Yunjue, and Ao Lingxiao were all killing in all directions. What goes around comes around. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, they could only be crushed if they weren't strong enough. If they didn't have the power to protect themselves, they would have already died. They could only leave the upper realm and head to the immortal region with peace of mind if these guys completely disappeared from this world. Otherwise, they would have to deal with these poisonous snakes all the time. No one knew when they would be bitten. The momentum was monstrous. The sound of killing filled the sky, mixed with screams and cries of alarm. The June family's buildings collapsed one after another. In just a short time, the June family's buildings near the battle circle had become a pile of ruins. The thick smell of blood spread in the air. The ground was gradually dyed red with blood. Everyone's body was stained with blood. They couldn't tell if it was their opponents or their own blood. However, the burning determination in everyone's eyes never changed. Di Baichen did not immediately join the battle. Instead, he began to summon skeletons again. When he first summoned it, he wasn't too familiar with it. After using it twice, he realized that he had become more familiar with it. Thinking about it, the more he used it in the future, the faster his summoning speed would become. Most importantly, with the help of these skeletons, the clan's casualties would be greatly reduced. Every single person was extremely precious to them. Although it was inevitable that some would fall in battle, it was also good to minimize the casualties. Huang Fu-Ting led a group of dark cultivators into the battle as well. These cultivators wanted to avenge the cultivators who died that day. Junhong Cheng's heart tightened when he saw Di Baichen summoning the skeleton army again. In fact, this was what he was most worried about. In the next moment, he rushed directly towards Di Baichen. As long as the skeleton army could not be summoned, everything was still possible. After seeing Junhong Cheng's actions, Di Yujue's figure flashed and directly blocked the latter's path. Junhong Cheng, with me here, you can't get close to Baichen. Junhong Cheng's face was gloomy. I'm going to kill you. Unfortunately, you still don't have the strength. Di Yujue's eyes were full of disdain. If President Liu hadn't appeared that day, you would have died at my hands. Chapter 6193. Di Yujue's figure flashed. His movements were as fast as lightning, and a terrifying attack directly attacked Junhong Cheng. Bang! Their fists collided, and both of them retreated 100 meters. The tyrannical energy burst out and the buildings on the side collapsed. Junhong Cheng's expression was extremely ugly. He knew very well that if they really fought, he was indeed no match for Di Yujue. It was indeed too difficult for him to bypass Di Yujue and stop Di Baichen. Looking around, the cultivators of the Jun and Shao family were almost all entangled with their opponent. Although each had their own advantages and disadvantages, it was obviously extremely difficult for them to clone themselves. Damn it! Jun Hongqing cursed inwardly. Even though he was depressed to the extreme, he was powerless to change all of this. With his mind in chaos, Junhong Cheng's combat strength was also affected. Di Yujue's attack landed fiercely on Junhong Cheng's weak spot. Bang! A heavy blow landed on Junhong Cheng's body. Junhong Cheng's figure was quickly sent flying. He stabilized his body in midair and stopped. However, from his flushed face, one could tell that this attack had made him very uncomfortable. After seeing that Junhong Cheng was injured, Xiao Yanlong also took advantage of the situation and rushed to Junhong Cheng's side. How are you? They absolutely could not fall now. Once the family head fell, their morale would be greatly affected, and they would be defeated in a short period of time. Even if today's ending could not be changed, at least they could not let the Di family and Lin family have an easy time. Junhong Cheng shook his head. I'm fine. You must hold on. Xiao Yanlong's tone was unprecedentedly serious. I understand. Junhong Cheng replied. His gaze quietly turned around and he transmitted his voice. We can't continue like this. We have to think of a way. Otherwise, failure is only a matter of time. Xiao Yanlong's face darkened. I know the current situation, but other than that, we have no other way. As long as we capture an important person and threaten them, we might be able to change everything. Junhong Cheng narrowed his eyes. The D family was indeed united. It was a good thing that they valued loyalty, but in a way it was also a fatal weakness. As long as they could capture an important person, they could take the opportunity to blackmail the other party. Even if they couldn't change the ending, they could at least restrain the D family. As Jun Hongcheng's voice fell, Xiao Yanlong also understood what he meant. With a thought, he had already thought of their goal. Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's position in Di Beichen's heart was very important. After all the things that had happened during this period of time, they were well aware of it. Most importantly, once Bailey Hongzhuang was captured, Di Beichen would definitely be distracted, and he might not be able to summon these skeletons again. Killing two birds with one stone, this was definitely an excellent opportunity. The two of them had the same idea, and both of them had locked their target on Bailey Hongzhuang. Diyu Jue did not expect the two of them to have come up with a plan in such a short time. However, he did not give the two of them any more time to communicate, and his figure charged forward once again. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. As long as these two fellows were subdued, the remaining cultivators from the two families would be nothing more than a bunch of loose sand. They would not be able to do anything at all. Chapter 6194. After Jun Hongcheng and Xiao Yanlong had made their decision, they no longer hesitated. They were still at a disadvantage in the current situation. After all, the other party had more people than them. If they could seize the opportunity to control Bailey Hongzhuang and grab hold of the other party's weakness, there was still a possibility of turning the tables. After Lin Wenlan had closed the distance between them, he immediately attacked. Xiao Yanlong continued to dodge and quickly widened the distance between the two of them. He was unwilling to face him head-on. Damn it, this fellow is like a loach. He's too hard to catch. Lin Wenlan cursed silently. He had wanted to subdue Xiao Yanlong as soon as possible so that he could get twice the result with half the effort. He never thought that it would be so troublesome. Xiao Yanlong tried his best to shake Lin Wenlan off by a certain distance before his figure flashed and charged directly towards Bailey Hongzhuang's direction. The sudden turn of events had exceeded everyone's expectations. Jun Hongcheng had also charged out at the same time. Clearly, the two of them had made up their minds to capture Bailey Hongzhuang. Hongzhuang, watch out! Diyu Jue hurriedly reminded her when he saw this. He had already increased his speed to the maximum, but he was still unable to catch up. Hearing Diyu Jue's cry, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes shifted slightly. She then noticed that Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng were charging towards her from two different directions. Most importantly, the two masters' cultivation levels were higher than hers. They had used their auras to lock onto her as they charged towards her. Under such circumstances, it was very difficult for her to even move her body. It would be too difficult for her to take advantage of the situation and escape. Diyu Jue and the rest explained as their hearts sank. Bailey Hongzhuang was too important to them. Once Bailey Hongzhuang was under their control, they could guess what kind of conditions Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng would propose. That kind of situation would be terrible. As they got closer and closer to Bailey Hongzhuang, the smile in Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng's eyes continued to widen. As long as they seized this opportunity, they could use it to threaten Diyu Jue and even Di Beichen. With Di Beichen's feelings for Bailey Hongzhuang, it was not impossible for him to make such a decision. Bailey Yanche and the rest rushed over immediately, but they were too late to make it in time. In the next moment, Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongcheng arrived at Bailey Hongzhuang's location almost at the same time. Bang! Jun Hongcheng directly attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. However, just as Jun Hongcheng was about to throw his punch, he suddenly realized that his fist seemed to have landed on thin air. He had not hit Bailey Hongzhuang at all. The feeling of landing a punch on thin air was very uncomfortable. However, Jun Hongcheng was not in the mood to think about all this at this moment. He was more curious about where Bailey Hongzhuang had gone. Xiao Yanlong was equally shocked. Bailey Hongzhuang had clearly been here just a second ago, and he had locked onto Bailey Hongzhuang's aura. However, in that short moment, he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's aura had disappeared. How could this be? Di Yujue and Lin Wenlan's faces were filled with astonishment as well. At that moment, they had even thought about how they would deal with the situation once Bailey Hongzhuang had been captured. However, she had actually disappeared into thin air? Chapter 6195. Just as Jun Hongqing was in a daze, Di Yujue's figure followed closely behind him. Bang! A ferocious attack flew fiercely towards Jun Hongqing. Di Yujue was no longer careless, and would not give Jun Hongqing any chance to escape. Bang bang bang! Their attacks were as fast as lightning. Many cultivators around them were sent flying by the impact of their attacks. Even the cultivators who were fighting did not dare to stay on the spot when they saw this scene. Their figures flashed and they quickly left. Lin Wenlan's movements were not slow either. Just as Di Yujue and Lin Wenlan arrived, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure once again appeared before everyone's eyes. What's going on? Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden appearance, the cultivators from the four great families' eyes were filled with confusion. Regardless of whether it was her disappearance earlier or her reappearance now, they could not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang had managed to do it. Bailey Hongzhuang heaved a sigh of relief. It was a good thing that her reaction was fast enough. When she realized that her aura had been locked onto and she was unable to move, she immediately entered the chaos ring with a single thought. Her aura had been locked onto and her body was indeed unable to move. However, her mental energy was not too affected, so she could still enter the chaos ring with ease. She only needed this short amount of time to do everything. With a single movement, Bailey Hongzhuang retreated from the master's battle circle. Jun Hongqing and Xiao Yanlong watched Bailey Hongzhuang's departing figure. Their hearts were filled with vexation and helplessness at the same time. This Bailey Hongzhuang really could not be judged using common sense. The battle between the two sides continued. After this incident, the battle between the two sides became even more intense. In the distance, some cultivators from Junyang City quietly observed the battle. After seeing the scene of blood flowing like a river, everyone's hearts were filled with endless emotions. A family that had stood tall in the upper realm for so many years was now facing a disaster. The world was unpredictable and no one could predict the outcome. Hongzhuang, are you all right? Di Baichen's figure flashed and he came to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. A smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. I'm fine. You've succeeded in summoning? Yes. Di Baichen nodded. As the number of summons increased, my summoning speed gradually increased. Practice makes perfect. Now everyone can relax a little. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved slightly. The skeleton army's battle prowess couldn't be underestimated. Although the skeleton's army, the battles, they had already had the upper hand. Now, the appearance of the skeleton army, the battle's end. Tap, tap, tap. The skeleton army's speed was very fast. Not long after Di Baichen's successful summoning, they had already appeared in a grandiose manner. Seeing the appearance of the skeleton army, the faces of Jun Hongqing and the others turned extremely ugly. Even though this scene was within their expectations, they still felt an indescribable pain when it appeared. This was because these skeletons were very lethal. Boom! With a collision of energy, Jun Hongqing's figure was directly sent flying. He crashed heavily on the ground, creating a huge crater,